Maya adjusted her cleaning supplies as she stepped into the grand living room of the Broderick estate. The massive chandelier above her shimmered like a constellation of diamonds, its light refracting across marble floors polished to a mirror finish. The mansion exuded opulence, but to Maya, it was just another workplace. A monument to wealth she could only dream of. She had been cleaning the estate for 6 months now, and in all that time, she had exchanged only a handful of words with the owner, Vincent Broderick. Vincent, the heir to a billion-dollar tech empire, was the kind of man whose presence filled a room before he even entered it. Cold, calculating, and devastatingly charismatic, he rarely addressed the staff beyond curt instructions. So when Maya heard his deep voice behind her, she nearly dropped the vase she was dusting. Maya! She spun around, clutching the duster like a shield. Vincent stood in the doorway, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, his sharp features framed by neatly combed dark hair. His piercing blue eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her stomach twist. "Yes, Mr. Broderick?" she managed to say, her voice steady despite her racing heart. He took a step closer, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You've been working here for a while now, haven't you?" "Yes, sir," she replied, unsure where this was going. "And you've done adequate work," he said. The compliment so backhanded it nearly smacked her. "Thank you," she said hesitantly, her fingers tightening around the duster. Vincent's smile widened, but there was something unsettling about it. "I'm hosting a party tomorrow night, a charity gala, the most exclusive event of the season, and I've decided you'll be attending." Maya blinked, certain she had misheard. I don't understand. I'm just the cleaner." "Exactly," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Which is why it will be refreshing to have someone of your station among the guests. A dose of authenticity, let's call it." Her chest tightened. She wasn't naive. This wasn't an invitation born of kindness or generosity. It was a setup, a game he intended to play at her expense. "I don't think I'm the right person for this, sir," she said carefully. "Nonsense," Vincent said, waving off her protest. "I insist. It'll be entertaining." Before she could argue further, he turned and strode out of the room, leaving her standing there with a mix of dread and disbelief. That night, Maya sat in her tiny apartment, staring at the invitation Vincent had sent down with his assistant. The gold-embossed card bore her name, as though she were some honored guest. Her best friend, Sophia, sat across from her, an incredulous look on her face. "You're seriously going?" Maya sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Do I have a choice? He's my boss." Sophia shook her head. "This is insane. You know he's doing this to humiliate you, right? Rich people love this kind of power trip." "I know," Maya admitted. "But if I don't go, he could fire me, and I can't afford that." Sophia leaned back, crossing her arms. "Fine, but if you're going, you're not walking into that lion's den unarmed. We're going to make sure you look so good, he won't know what hit him." The next evening, Maya arrived at the Broderick estate dressed in a sleek black gown Sophia had loaned her. It was simple but elegant, hugging her figure in all the right places. Her hair, usually tied back in a practical ponytail, now cascaded in soft waves around her shoulders. As she stepped through the mansion's grand entrance, she felt every pair of eyes in the room turn toward her. The crowd was a sea of designer suits and couture gowns, their wearers sipping champagne and exchanging whispers behind glimmering masks of civility. Maya's heart raced as she moved through the throng, acutely aware of how out of place she was. She could hear the murmurs. "Who is she? Is she someone's date? She doesn't look like one of us." Then Vincent appeared. He cut through the crowd like a blade, his presence commanding attention. When his eyes landed on Maya, he smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted his prey. "Maya," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "You made it." She forced a polite smile. "Thank you for inviting me, Mr. Broderick." He extended a hand, gesturing for her to follow him. "Come. There are some people I'd like you to meet." She hesitated but followed, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. Vincent led her to a group of his peers, men and women who exuded the same air of wealth and superiority. "This is Maya," Vincent announced, his tone casual but laced with mockery. "She works for me." The group's smiles were polite but thin, their eyes scanning her like she was an exhibit in a zoo. "How fascinating," one of the women said, her voice dripping with feigned interest. "And what do you do for Mr. Broderick?" Maya straightened her shoulders. "I'm his cleaner." There was a moment of stunned silence, followed by a ripple of laughter that cut through her like a blade. Vincent chuckled, his eyes glinting with amusement. "She's being modest. Maya's been invaluable to the estate." Maya's cheeks burned, but she refused to lower her gaze. If Vincent thought he could embarrass her into submission, he was wrong. "Thank you, Mr. Broderick," she said, her voice steady. "It's always a pleasure to work in such interesting company." The group exchanged amused glances, clearly enjoying the spectacle. Vincent smirked, leaning closer. "Don't stray too far, Maya. The night is just beginning." As the evening wore on, Maya found herself drifting to the edges of the party, watching from a safe distance as the guests reveled in their wealth and power. She felt like an outsider in every sense of the word. Then, she heard it. A conversation between two guests, their voices low but audible. "She's bold. I'll give her that," one man said. "Vincent's setting her up," the woman replied. "Didn't you hear? He's planning something big. Wants to make a scene." Maya's stomach turned. Whatever Vincent had planned, it was clear she was the centerpiece of his twisted game. But as she looked around the room, an idea began to form in her mind. If Vincent wanted to humiliate her, maybe it was time to turn the tables. Maya steadied her breath, pushing down the rising tide of dread. She wasn't about to let Vincent Broderick, with his cold smirk and cruel games, dictate how the night would go. If he wanted a spectacle, she'd give him one, on her terms. She slipped through the crowd, scanning the room for someone who could help her. The guests were a mixture of wealthy elites and their sycophants, each engrossed in their conversations. It wasn't long before she spotted him. A man in his early 30s with a charming smile and an expensive watch that caught the light as he gestured animatedly. He stood out not just because of his polished appearance, but because he seemed approachable. Unlike the others, he wasn't drenched in cold arrogance. She'd overheard someone call him Daniel, a name she vaguely remembered hearing Vincent use in meetings. With a deep breath, Maya approached him. "Excuse me," she said, her voice soft but firm enough to catch his attention. Daniel turned, his dark eyes widening slightly when he saw her. "Well, hello. You're new to this scene." "I am," she admitted, "and I could use your help." His brows knitted in confusion, but curiosity danced in his expression. "What kind of help?" "I know this sounds strange, but Vincent invited me here as a joke," she said, choosing her words carefully. "I don't belong here, and he's planning something to humiliate me. I need to make sure he doesn't succeed." Daniel tilted his head, studying her for a moment. "You're serious?" "Completely." A slow smile spread across his face. "You've got guts coming to me for help. Do you know who I am?" "Not exactly," she admitted, "but you seem different." He chuckled, his tone warm. "I'm Vincent's business partner. At least I was. We don't exactly see eye to eye anymore." "Perfect," Maya said, a spark of hope igniting in her chest. "Then maybe you'd be willing to help me knock him down a peg." Daniel's smile grew wider, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "I like your spirit. What's the plan?" The two of them found a quiet corner of the party, where Maya explained everything she'd overheard. As she spoke, Daniel's expression darkened. "That sounds exactly like something Vincent would do," he said, shaking his head. "He's always enjoyed making people feel small. But don't worry, I've got a few ideas." Before Maya could ask what he meant, Vincent's voice rang out across the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please." The crowd quieted, turning toward him. He stood on a small stage near the grand piano, a glass of champagne in hand. His smile was broad, but Maya could see the glint of malice behind it. "Tonight, we celebrate not only the success of the Broderick Foundation, but the spirit of generosity and charity that drives us forward," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "And in that spirit, I'd like to introduce a special guest who embodies these values. Maya, our very own Cinderella for the evening." A murmur rippled through the crowd as Vincent gestured toward her, his gaze locking onto hers. Daniel leaned close, his voice low. "Whatever happens, don't let him see you flinch." Maya squared her shoulders and stepped forward, the room parting around her like the sea. Every eye was on her, some curious, some amused, others openly disdainful. "Come up here, Maya," Vincent said, his smile widening. "Let's show everyone how you clean up." The room erupted in polite laughter, but Maya kept her face neutral, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her falter. She climbed the steps to the stage, her heart pounding but her steps steady. When she reached Vincent, he handed her a glass of champagne. "To Maya," he said, raising his own glass. "Proof that, with a little effort, even the humblest among us can shine." The laughter this time was louder, sharper. Maya felt her cheeks burn, but she forced herself to smile. "Thank you, Mr. Broderick," she said, her voice carrying through the room. "And thank you all for making me feel so welcome tonight." Vincent's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but he quickly recovered. "Of course, you're the star of the evening." Maya took a sip of the champagne, her mind racing. She could feel the weight of the crowd's judgment, their whispers brushing against her like cold wind. Then, Daniel stepped onto the stage. "Vincent," he said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "A word, if I may?" Vincent turned, his smile tightening. "Daniel, what a surprise. Didn't think you'd show tonight." "I wouldn't miss it," Daniel said, his tone light but laced with something sharp. He glanced at Maya, then back at Vincent. "I couldn't help but notice how much attention you're giving Maya here. It's rare to see you so generous." The crowd chuckled, sensing the tension. "Well, she deserves it," Vincent said smoothly. "Maya's been a valuable member of the team." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Valuable enough to warrant a public spectacle?" Vincent's eyes narrowed. "What are you getting at?" Daniel smiled, turning to the crowd. "I think what Vincent's really trying to say is that Maya's more than just a cleaner. She's someone who stands out, even among all of us here tonight. Isn't that right, Vincent?" The crowd murmured in agreement, their attention shifting. Maya felt a flicker of relief as Daniel steered the spotlight away from Vincent's cruel intentions. But Vincent wasn't done. "Absolutely," he said, his smile returning. "In fact, I think Maya should take the stage again later. Perhaps she could share a few words about her journey. After all, everyone loves an underdog story." The words dripped with mockery, and the crowd laughed again. But this time, Maya wasn't alone. Daniel leaned closer, whispering, "Let's give him a story he'll never forget." Vincent's smugness radiated across the room as the crowd chuckled at his thinly veiled insults. Maya felt her pulse quicken, but beside her, Daniel's calm demeanor gave her the strength to hold her ground. If Vincent wanted a story, she'd give him one he wouldn't soon forget. "Thank you, Mr. Broderick," Maya said, her voice carrying with surprising confidence. "I'd be honored to share a few words." Vincent's smirk wavered for a fraction of a second. He hadn't expected her to accept. Maya stepped forward, the room falling silent as every eye turned toward her. She took a deep breath and began, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "I started working for Mr. Broderick 6 months ago. Cleaning this estate has been enlightening. It's given me a unique perspective on what it means to truly work hard and face challenges head-on." The room was quiet now, the crowd leaning in to hear her. Maya smiled, her gaze sweeping across the sea of opulent gowns and tailored suits. Every day, I see the grandeur of this mansion, the beautiful art, the gleaming floors, the perfect symmetry of every detail, she continued. But what I've learned is that all this doesn't make a person great. It's how you treat others that defines true character. Vincent's smile froze, his eyes narrowing as he realized where she was going. Someone once told me, Maya said, her voice sharpening, that no matter how much money or power you have, if you lack kindness, you have nothing. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Maya held her chin high, refusing to back down. I'm grateful to be here tonight, not because of the glitz and glamour, but because I've had the chance to meet people who see beyond appearances, she said, glancing pointedly at Daniel, who gave her a subtle nod of encouragement. Vincent's jaw tightened. That's very touching, Maya, he said, his voice colder now. But perhaps we should return to the evening's purpose, celebrating success and ambition. After all, that's why we're all here. Maya turned to him, her smile unwavering. You're absolutely right, Mr. Broderick. And nothing speaks to ambition more than rising above pettiness and cruelty. Wouldn't you agree? The crowd stilled, and Vincent's smile faltered completely. Daniel seized the moment, stepping forward with a glass raised. To Maya, he said, his voice cutting through the tension, for reminding us all what true strength looks like. The room erupted into applause, the unexpected shift leaving Vincent visibly unsettled. Maya glanced at Daniel, her gratitude shining in her eyes. As the applause subsided, Vincent stepped off the stage, his expression darkening. Maya followed, ready to retreat to the sidelines, but Daniel stopped her with a light touch on her arm. Not so fast, he said, his voice low. Vincent's not going to let this slide. If you want to really turn the tables, we need to push him. Maya hesitated, her heart still pounding. How? Daniel's lips curled into a sly smile. Follow my lead. He guided her toward a group of guests who had been whispering about Vincent's earlier antics. Daniel greeted them warmly, slipping easily into conversation as Maya lingered by his side. I couldn't help but notice Vincent's enthusiasm for theatrics tonight, Daniel said casually. But it seems Maya's the real star of the show. The group chuckled, their attitudes shifting from amused to intrigued. One woman, draped in diamonds, leaned in. Maya, tell us, what's it really like working for Mr. Broderick? Maya hesitated, glancing at Daniel. He gave her a reassuring nod. Well, she began carefully, it's challenging, but I've learned a lot about perseverance and standing up for myself. The group exchanged knowing looks, their curiosity piqued. Daniel smirked. Challenging is an understatement. I'm sure Vincent has kept you on your toes. The laughter that followed was louder this time, drawing the attention of nearby guests. Within moments, a small crowd had gathered, and the questions came pouring in. Across the room, Vincent watched with growing irritation as Maya became the center of attention. His jaw clenched, and he drained his champagne glass in one angry gulp. Is everything all right, Mr. Broderick? A sleekly dressed man asked, sidling up to him. Vincent forced a tight smile. Of course, just enjoying the party. But inside he was seething. How had his carefully orchestrated humiliation turned into this? Maya was supposed to be a spectacle, a punchline, not a hero. He turned to his assistant, who was standing nearby. Get the staff ready. I want something memorable for the finale, he said through gritted teeth. The assistant hesitated. Sir, are you sure? It might... Do it, Vincent snapped. Meanwhile, Maya was finally beginning to feel at ease. The guests seemed genuinely interested in her, and with Daniel by her side, she no longer felt like a pawn in Vincent's game. But her reprieve was short-lived. A loud chime rang through the room, silencing the chatter. Vincent's voice boomed over the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention once more. Maya's stomach sank. Vincent stood at the center of the room, his smile back in place, though it now carried a razor-sharp edge. This evening has been full of surprises, he said, his tone smooth but sinister. And I'd like to end it with one more. The lights dimmed, and a spotlight fell on Maya. Maya, why don't you join me once again? Daniel leaned close, whispering, stay strong. We're not done yet. Maya nodded, her nerves steeling as she stepped into the spotlight. Maya stepped into the spotlight, every nerve in her body on edge. The crowd fell silent, their anticipation thick in the air. Vincent stood at the center of the room, his posture confident, his expression exuding control. He looked every bit the master of ceremonies, a man who held the strings to every puppet in the room. Maya glanced at Daniel, who remained on the edges of the crowd, his eyes locked on hers. His subtle nod gave her the courage to hold her head high. Whatever Vincent had planned, she wouldn't let him see her falter. Ladies and gentlemen, Vincent began, raising his arms as though addressing an adoring audience. Tonight, we've celebrated ambition, success, and the spirit of perseverance. And what better example of these qualities than Maya here? The crowd murmured, their eyes darting between Vincent and Maya. Vincent smiled, the kind of smile that made Maya's skin crawl. But let's not forget where she came from. Maya isn't one of us. She's not a socialite or a philanthropist. She's a cleaner, a humble worker who makes sure this estate sparkles as brightly as it does tonight. The murmurs grew louder, a mix of amusement and discomfort rippling through the guests. And yet, Vincent continued, pacing slowly. She's shown remarkable determination to fit in with us tonight. Admirable, wouldn't you agree? His tone dripped with mockery, and the room filled with polite, uncertain laughter. Maya felt the weight of the crowd's judgment pressing down on her. She forced herself to keep her composure, even as her heart raced. But I have to wonder, Vincent said, stopping to face her directly. Can someone like Maya truly belong in our world? The question hung in the air like a dagger. The crowd leaned in, waiting for her response. Maya's mind raced. This was the moment he had been building toward, a public humiliation designed to remind her of her place. But she wasn't about to let him win. She smiled, her voice steady as she said, "That's an interesting question, Mr. Broderick, but maybe the real question is whether your world is worth belonging to." The room went silent. For a moment, all Maya could hear was the pounding of her own heart. Vincent's smile tightened, his eyes narrowing. "A bold response," he said, "but actions speak louder than words, don't they?" He turned to the crowd, his voice booming. "Let's put Maya's perseverance to the test, shall we? A little game to end the night on a high note." Before Maya could protest, staff members appeared, wheeling out a table covered in an ornate cloth. The crowd parted as the table was set in the center of the room. Vincent gestured dramatically. "Maya, since you've spent so much time in my home, I'm sure you've come across some of my more valuable possessions. Let's see if you can identify one of them." The cloth was whisked away, revealing a glittering array of jewels, artifacts, and other priceless items. The crowd gasped, and Maya felt her stomach drop. This wasn't just a game, it was a trap. "Go ahead," Vincent said, his smile wolfish. "Choose the item that stands out to you the most." Maya glanced at the table, then at Vincent. The way he was watching her, the sharpness in his smile. It was clear this wasn't as simple as it seemed. She hesitated, then stepped forward, scanning the items. Each one sparkled under the lights, their value undeniable. But there was one object that caught her eye, a delicate, gold-encrusted box, its surface engraved with intricate patterns. "That one," she said, pointing to it. Vincent's smile widened. "Excellent choice." He picked up the box and held it up for the crowd to see. "This," he said, "is a one-of-a-kind heirloom, passed down through generations of the Broderick family. Its value is immeasurable. And tonight, it's at the center of our little game." Maya's chest tightened. She could feel the trap closing in around her. Vincent stepped closer, his voice low and conspiratorial. "You see, Maya, I've always believed that ambition requires risk. So, here's your chance to prove your worth. If you can open this box, its contents are yours. The crowd buzzed with excitement, their whispers filling the room. And if I can't? Maya asked, her voice steady. Vincent's smile turned predatory. Then perhaps it's a reminder that some doors are meant to remain closed. He handed her the box, its weight heavier than she expected. The intricate lock was unlike anything she'd ever seen, a mechanism that seemed as much a puzzle as a security device. The crowd watched in rapt silence as Maya studied the box. She could feel Vincent's eyes on her, waiting for her to fail. But as her fingers traced the patterns on the surface, something clicked in her mind. The engravings weren't just decorative, they were a map. Her breath caught as she twisted a small section of the box, aligning the patterns. The lock clicked, and the lid popped open. The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers filling the room. Vincent's face darkened, his mask of confidence slipping. Inside the box was a glittering necklace, its diamonds catching the light. Maya held it up, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She turned to Vincent, her smile calm but triumphant. I guess ambition does pay off. The crowd laughed and cheered, and for the first time, Maya felt like she had won. As the party continued, Vincent retreated to the edges of the room, his fury barely contained. Daniel found Maya amidst the crowd, his smile full of admiration. That was incredible. Thanks, she said, her voice soft. But I don't think he's done yet. Daniel's expression turned serious. Neither are we. Vincent's carefully composed mask cracked as he stalked to the edge of the room, his fists clenched. Maya's triumph in opening the heirloom box had turned the tide of the evening against him, and the crowd's laughter now felt like 1,000 cuts. For the first time, his grip on the event was slipping. Maya, still holding the glittering necklace, stood amidst the applause. She glanced at Daniel, who gave her a nod of encouragement. Her confidence surged. She wasn't done yet. Vincent stepped forward, raising a hand to silence the crowd. A marvelous performance, Maya, he said, his voice strained but still carrying its usual charm. Truly impressive. But let's not forget that we're here for a cause greater than games. The crowd quieted, sensing the tension. Vincent's eyes flickered to his assistant, who hurriedly whispered something in his ear. His gaze returned to Maya, sharp as a blade. Of course, Vincent continued, a predatory smile returning to his lips. A single moment doesn't define a person. What matters is character, consistency, and trustworthiness. Maya stiffened. She could feel the shift in the air, the undercurrent of unease spreading through the crowd. Vincent gestured to the staff near the entrance. 2 security guards entered, carrying a tablet. I regret to inform you, he said, addressing the crowd with feigned regret, that certain irregularities have come to my attention. He turned to Maya, his eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. Would you care to explain these, Maya? The guards handed him the tablet, and Vincent displayed it to the audience. On the screen were images of jewelry, watches, and other valuables, items that looked suspiciously similar to pieces in his collection. Maya's heart sank. What are you talking about? These photos, Vincent said, his voice rising, are of items missing from my estate, and coincidentally, they've been found in your possession. The crowd gasped, their whispers turning venomous. Maya's hands tightened into fists. That's a lie, she said, her voice steady despite the panic bubbling beneath. Vincent raised an eyebrow, his smile widening. Is it? Perhaps you'd like to explain how these items came to be photographed in your apartment. Maya froze. She knew the answer. Vincent had set her up, planted evidence to discredit her. But how could she prove it? Before she could respond, Daniel stepped forward. That's enough, Vincent, he said, his tone cutting through the tension. We both know this is a fabrication. Vincent turned to him, his smile faltering. Excuse me? Daniel took the tablet from Vincent's hands, his movements deliberate. He tapped a few buttons, then turned the screen back to the crowd. These photos were uploaded from an IP address belonging to you, Vincent. The room erupted into stunned murmurs. Vincent's face twisted in fury. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I do, Daniel said, his voice calm but unyielding. I've worked with you long enough to recognize your tactics. You can't handle being outsmarted, so you resort to petty sabotage. But not tonight. He turned to the crowd, his voice rising. Maya didn't come here to steal or to beg for your approval. She came because she was invited by a man who thought he could use her as a prop for his own amusement. And when she proved herself, he tried to tear her down. That's who Vincent Broderick is. The room fell silent. All eyes were on Vincent, whose expression had darkened into something ugly. This is absurd, Vincent spat. You have no proof. Daniel smiled. Actually, I do. He tapped the tablet again, pulling up security footage from the estate. On the screen, Vincent's assistant could be seen sneaking into Maya's cleaning supplies and planting the items. The gasps from the crowd turned into whispers of disbelief, then outright condemnation. Vincent's confidence shattered as the crowd's opinion turned against him. For the first time, he looked vulnerable, exposed. Maya stepped forward, her voice clear and steady. You invited me here to humiliate me, Mr. Broderick. But all you've done is show everyone your true colors. The crowd erupted into applause, their support now firmly behind her. Vincent glared at Daniel, his hands trembling with rage. You've made a mistake, Daniel. This will cost you. Daniel shrugged, his smile unwavering. I think it's worth it. As the party wound down, Maya found herself surrounded by guests who offered their apologies and admiration. For the first time, she felt seen, not as a cleaner, but as a person who had stood her ground. Daniel approached her, his expression warm. You handled that better than most people would have. Thanks to you, she said, her gratitude genuine. He shook his head. You did it yourself. I just gave you a platform. She smiled, a weight lifting from her shoulders. I'm not sure what's next, but I know one thing. I'm not afraid of Vincent Broderick anymore. Good, Daniel said, his voice firm, because I think he's going to have a lot more to worry about than you. Maya left the Broderick estate that night with her head held high, knowing that she had not only survived but won. And as for Vincent, his carefully curated reputation was beginning to crumble, a fate he had brought upon himself.